The DCU finally begins as Creature Commandos' first 2 episodes released this week. Spinning out of the events of James Gunn's Suicide Squad and Peacemaker projects, Creature Commandos picks up 2 years after the events of Peacemaker Season 1, where Waller's daughter, Adebayo, outed her Task Force X project to the world. Thanks to this, Waller is put on a sort of watch list, unable to make another squad without the government getting involved. But that of course does not stop her, as she finds a bit of a technical loophole, deciding that instead of making a team full of humans or metahumans, she will make a team of monsters, people no one care about. The show kind of throws us into the deep end just a little bit here and expects you to at least be familiar with the Suicide Squad or Peacemaker, or at least the end of Peacemaker. It doesn't really connect deeply to those aside from a few references to Project Starfish, and of course the biggest one being Rick Flag's death, since one of the first characters we're introduced to here is Rick Flag Sr., played by Frank Grillo. Flag is tasked with dealing with the Sons of Themyscira, a militant right-wing group of incels who are working for the Amazonian sorceress Cersei, who has promised if they help her invade Pakistan and take her supposed rightful place on the nation's throne, she will lead them to the fabled island of the Amazons. Cersei being the DCU's first big villain is fantastic. It's creative and it's different, and I like that it's not just another Batman villain, a different type of Superman villain. It's not General Zod again, it's a Wonder Woman villain, and we're getting her before we actually even know who's playing Wonder Woman and where we're going to see her first. So that's really interesting that we're just getting all of these villains and characters who are related to characters we haven't actually been introduced to yet, and they're just part of the world. And I think that's really an interesting way to do things, and I think Gunn has said that he wants to not be like the MCU, he wants to be like Star Wars, where we can just kind of get dropped into something and be like, oh, this guy's here now, oh, that's awesome, let's see what happens here. And that's exactly what he is doing here with Cersei. It's also really fun that it's just a straight up magical villain. There's no tech enhanced metahuman stuff. They're not doing like a realistic take on Cersei where she's using some type of tech to act as magic. No, she's literally an Amazonian sorceress. She has actual magic, which is really interesting, and I can't wait to see how they play with that. The Sons of Themyscira are a neat inclusion as well, as they technically do exist in comics. They're a different type of thing in comics, where in comics they're like the men of Themyscira who have been enslaved and made to make weapons. I believe for Hephaestus, it's a really weird concept and one that's kind of gone away and hasn't been in comics for quite a while. So I like that they've kind of been reused here as these like right-wing grifter guys who are very clearly taking reference from certain online right-wing grifters that we unfortunately have to see and hear through social media every now and then. But I like that right off the bat we're made completely aware. They aren't aware yet, but Cersei is basically using them, using their thirst for women and for things like that, very unsavory things, to get what she wants. She has no interest in making them get to Themyscira or anything. She's just using them to do her bidding. Thanks to these guys and Cersei threatening Pakistan, Amanda Waller, again played by Viola Davis, tasks Rick Flag Sr. to head to the nation and help protect its ruler, Princess Ilyana Rostovich. Now I know what you're thinking, this might seem a little bit out of character for Waller, where she's like sending in her own team to help out a foreign power, but it's all part of her plan, as Pakistan is sitting on some valuable resources, and if they end up becoming friends with them or making it look like America is kind of nice to these guys, maybe they'll reciprocate and get some of these resources for themselves. It's all a game to Waller, and I like that they make that very clear from the beginning. To help defend the princess, Rick Flag assembles Task Force M, or the Creature Commandos, and the team is made up of the Bride, GI Robot, Dr. Phosphorus, Nina Mazursky, and Weasel. And after a fun intro sequence, we are thrust right into their mission. Along with being introduced to these characters, we're again introduced to the music of the show. A big part of James Gunn's movies and TV shows are the music, and he's always had fantastic and really interesting music choices, and Creature Commandos is no different. This time it's focusing on a very fitting kind of Eastern European rock theme with bands like Gogol Bordello and Fanfare Sio Kalia. It does go a long way to help set the tone for the series, this kind of offbeat, fun, high energy music, and it contrasts nicely with how dark some of the plot gets, especially in episode 2. With the creature commandos assembled, they head to Pokolasan and meet with the princess and her guards, which gives us time to kind of get to know the members a little bit. We get a neat little bit between Nina and GI Robot, where Nina is very anxious and she doesn't particularly want to be part of this team, much like we usually get on every one of these teams, and she kind of tries to sort of bond with GI Robot a little bit. And GI Robot, of course, is just interested in killing Nazis. That's all his programming will allow him to do, and he's just very eager to do that. And Waller has promised that he will get to kill Nazis if he goes on this mission, which I guess is kind of true. They're facing the sons of Themyscira, which is, pretty much Nazis, so I imagine he's going to have a lot of fun a little later on in this show. The big character who is actually the standout is the Bride, and it's really interesting and quite a bold choice to have the first main character of the DCU, or at least of these new projects of the DCU, be the Bride of Frankenstein, but it 100% works thanks to Indira Varma's wonderful voice acting. Sean Gunn also moves from motion capturing his brother's characters to actively voicing them, and he actually ends up voicing GI Robot and Weasel, although Weasel doesn't really talk, it's just grunts and stuff. And he does a great job with this, especially with GI Robot. As I said, I just love how he's all about killing Nazis, and he brings like a dryness to it where there's this innocence to it. It's like he just wants to kill Nazis. He's just that simple. It's not very complicated character. An interesting thing is that this cast is like a neat mix of like people who are known for, live action stuff. Like Indira Varma is known for, she's on Game of Thrones, she was in Obi-Wan Kenobi, she's been all over the place. But then you have people like Alan Tudyk, who you do recognize from stuff like Firefly, Serenity, but he is a big voiceover guy. Again, more Star Wars with K2SO. And I like that there's this neat mix of characters who are played by people who are known for their more physical live action stuff, and then there's the voiceover people. So like Frank Grillo, you know him as like an action guy. You don't really expect him to do voiceover work, but he does it really well. And usually there's a bit of a worry when you get actors coming in to do voice acting stuff, because it doesn't really translate all that well, but it's so far working very, very well. Along with meeting the team, we also get to see this kind of one-sided romance start to blossom between Flag and the princess, who is very taken with the strong American man coming in to help her. And we get hints that like her family gene pool, as the Bride puts it, was above ground and very shallow. So he coming in and being this big strong man and everything, she's quite taken by him. I do think there is something going on with how quick she is moving towards wanting to bed him. I think people have theorized that maybe she's Clayface, or maybe that this is like part of Cersei's plan or something. I'm sure we'll find out that sort of stuff a little later on, because it was very quick that she just wanted to jump his bones pretty much from the get-go. Things begin to heat up as the Bride decides to take off from the castle, prompting Nina to follow her, and these two come a bit of a team across these first 2 episodes, and it's a great pairing as the Bride is rude, forceful and frustrated, while Nina is more quiet and anxious. They kind of play well against each other. The two leave to visit the Frankenstein estate, which just so happens to also be on the outskirts of the town they are in. It's a little bit of a convenient thing, but I guess that's probably why Waller chose the Bride for this, because it would be her homeland. And while she hints that they don't really know much about the Bride, I have a feeling that Waller actually does know quite a bit about the Bride. I can kind of wave it away if it ends up coming back later, but it just seems a little convenient that the Bride is part of this team going to this nation that she once called home, and that Frankenstein's castle was just, down the road more or less. She can take a taxi, which is kind of a funny visual when you think about it. While the Bride and Nina deal with that, Rick ends up getting into a violent fight with Dr. Phosphorus after the villain tries to take the remote detonator to the bombs in their skulls from Flag. Now this is a really fun fight, since you expect Phosphorus to easily win thanks to his powers, but gets creative using his superior military training and things like pots and pans and even some oven mitts to attack the villain without being burned by his radioactive fire. Still gets a couple of burns here and there, but it's a very violent, destructive fight, and I like that it ends with Rick trying to befriend Phosphorus and tell him that he is not like Waller and he will not use this device, but Waller will. So they need to work together to ensure that that does not happen. As we round out the first episode, the Bride and Nina arrive at Frankenstein's castle, and after being spotted by the groundskeeper, Frankenstein himself is alerted. DC's version of Frankenstein is one of my favorites. I loved all of the stuff they did with him in the New 52 with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., actually giving him some spotlight and whatnot. He's appeared every now and then in some Superman comics, and I loved that he is now involved in this project, and I'm even more excited that he's being voiced by David Harbour. Very fitting choice for the role of the Hulk in creation, especially because Gunn has said that a lot of these characters will be played by the people who voiced them in live action. So I can absolutely see Indira Varma as the Bride in live action and David Harbour as Frankenstein in live action. There's all these characters and their voices match perfectly with who they would appear in live action, and very excited to see where that first appears in this new DCU. I have to imagine it's going to be in Superman with Rick Flag, and I'm wondering what other characters are going to appear in that movie as well. We learned that Eric Frankenstein seems to have been looking for the bride for a long while, and as we enter episode 2, we learn a bit more about the bride's backstory, getting to witness her birth and how Frankenstein longed for a wife. I enjoy how at first you think this longing is out of some sort of like thing that's missing in him, and in a way it is, but then the more it goes on, the more the episode goes on, you find out that this is something that he has seen people like Victor, his creator, and other people he has witnessed around Pokolistan do. So then he feels like he must do it because that's what something like living human people do, and he doesn't realize that there is like a love and like there is a connection. He wants that end result without putting in the work. In that regard, he's kind of like a child where like he doesn't get what he wants and he lashes out, and eventually he lashes out quite big time because he ends up killing Victor. I quite like how they're framing this as like he's like a petulant child, and it gets a little worse a little later on, very, very dark, and we'll talk about that when it comes to it. But I really like how much they're building up the bride and Frankenstein's relationship, or lack of one, and how that's kind of like a driving force across these first 2 episodes. The focus on the bride and her evolution from, as Victor puts it, a newborn is so interesting, since it's something seldom seen in adaptations of Frankenstein, and something I've never actually really considered about the Bride of Frankenstein either. And it's something that's also very dark in the fact that, you know, as Victor puts it, she is a child, and Eric wants to love this child, but you know, in a biblical sense. So it is very dark. Now, these scenes are actually shown in flashback as the bride and Nina arrive at the mansion and begin searching for a necklace in the rundown mansion that the bride lost long ago, kind of retracing her steps to find the gift that Victor once gave her. While she begins to relive her traumatic past, Flag again is propositioned by the princess, and this time decides to just give in, having a very intimate moment with her in a bathroom while she patches up his wounds from his fight with Dr. Phosphorus. And it leads to kind of a fun interaction where Phosphorus is just kind of trying to be a bro now to Flag after he's seen what he doesn't intend to let Waller hurt them. So he's just kind of trying to make up for the fact that he tried to kill Flag, and he's trying to cover for him while he's in there with the princess, with the guards, and it's a very fun little scene. The team soon learn that the bride and Nina have gone AWOL, finding they have left the castle, and after tracking them down with the help of the guardsmen, they head out to look for them, and just in time too, as the Sons of Themyscira have been tracking the bride and Nina, leading to Cersei to confront them at Frankenstein's manor. This leads to the big set piece of episode 2, or basically of the 2 episodes, as the bride and the Sons of Themyscira really go at it, with the bride wiping the floor with the soldiers before confronting Cersei for a very violent knock 'em down, drag 'em out fight across the mansion grounds. If the action in this show is any indication on how the live action stuff will look, I think we are in for a treat, as it's very hard hitting, it's appropriately violent for these characters, and has some really creative, very comic booky moments, like when Cersei uses her powers to turn the bride's arms into those wacky inflatable car sale advertisement things. That's very, very strange for Cersei to do something like that. Like, it feels like it was like a last ditch like attempt at like an attack, and she just like had something come into her mind to like stop the bride's attack. So I like that it was just kind of like a last ditch fight or flight sort of move on her part. As the fight progresses, we actually learn more about the bride's past, finding that her and Victor ended up falling in love because Victor was teaching her, words and educating her basically. And this is like kind of the dark stuff, because this is like Victor falling in love with a child. It's very strange, very weird, and it's meant to be. It's not meant to be some sort of like a beautiful romance or anything. It's meant to be like fucked up. And on top of all of that, Eric actually ends up seeing this and gets very angry at Victor and ends up killing him. And this leads to the bride attacking Eric and setting fire to the castle and to Eric, as she flees across the centuries and across the world to try and escape this basically what is like a simp on an extreme level. Eric Frankenstein is just a simp who will not leave this woman alone. And I quite like this sequence where they're traveling throughout the years. They go from like a Wild West town, a Victorian era London, hippie, Woodstock stuff, where we get to see Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, which is very fun, all the way up to like modern day, and he just will not leave her alone. The episode rounds out itself with Nina's water-filled helmet being broken by the sons of Themyscira, causing her to begin to die from the lack of water, and the bride being beaten so badly and thrown from the manor roof by Cersei that she too is starting to bleed out and die. While I know we are leaving it on a cliffhanger until this coming week, I do think we should have gotten maybe one more episode here to close out this first arc. Maybe it's just me being greedy and wanting more of this show right away, because the bride's arc was super solid and very compelling across these two episodes. My only worry is that maybe the week's wait will kind of cut the legs out from the story or the impact of her story, and hopefully it doesn't, because it's very riveting stuff from a character, the bride of Frankenstein of all characters. But hopefully it doesn't sour too many people on having to wait a week between episodes. And I am a big proponent of the weekly episode release, but here I think maybe we just need that one more episode, just kind of round everything out in that first arc. Creature Commandos was an absolute blast from beginning to end. James Gunn has really found a formula that works with these teams of misfits, and while there are very clear things that he does over and over again between Guardians of the Galaxy, Peacemaker, and his Suicide Squad movies, his ability to tap into a brilliant emotional arc for a few characters, and they're always weird characters, in this case the bride, and explore something very interesting that kind of adapts their comic stories and origins in some really fun and interesting ways and puts some new spins on it that still adheres to their core characteristics. I don't know how he does it. He's just a master at that sort of stuff. I can't wait to see more of this team, and with a brief trailer at the end of these episodes hinting at very brief appearances from characters like Superman, Clayface, maybe even Staff, Sapphire, and Captain Atom, as well as a larger overarching story for the DCU, I think the DCU is finally in a good set of capable hands with James Gunn, Peter Safran, and all the guys that worked across this entire project, and I'm very excited, and it feels good to actually be excited for a DC film and TV property in a long while. It feels very good. I'm going to give both these episodes a 9 out of 10.